So, hello everybody. My background is plant physiology, but I switched to cell biology more or less some 20 years ago, 25. So I consider myself more cell biologist like plant physiologist. And also my topic will be split in two parts. One part is our new idea, which we developed in last 10 years. About the cellular sentience, cellular consciousness. And the second part will be devoted to the cell theory and evolution.
Great. And maybe perhaps your own definition of cellular intelligence shortly. I mean, we will discuss it later, but just to be prepared, to have an idea.
Yes. I will talk about this in my presentation.
Okay. So, Bran, please.
Yes, I've been publishing. I first published on cellular intelligence 50 years ago this year in a book called Microbe Power: Tomorrow's Revolution. And I should explain more, like everybody else. My function will be to demolish the absurd notion that we are attempting to create digital life substitutes, which is an absolute nonsense. It always was, and it always will be. Intelligence has many definitions. I doubt whether you would find the same definition if you asked two sources, but they all have one thing in common. The definition of intelligence, it's not ingenuity, the definition of intelligence is the adaptive ability to solve a previously not experienced problem, a problem that cannot be foreseen. That's intelligence. You often see people on quiz shows and the audience will say, oh, how intelligent. No, he has good memory. That's not intelligence. Intelligence is the ability to solve by adaptive processes a previously unforeseen and unforeseeable eventuality. And every definition of intelligence alludes in some way to that.
Okay, thank you. So I would suggest to start with the first presenter, František Baluška, and his thesis and approach to cellular intelligence.
Okay. No. I'm not sure if I am good in this Google meeting, so I'm now presentation will started, but there is some message here.
Maybe you have to share the slides on the down.
Question: select the window or screen or
on a screen. On a screen is better.
Entire screen.
Yeah.
Allow. Okay. Is it there?
Now.
Yes.
Okay.
It's coming.
Okay. So do you see it? Is it okay?
Yes.
Yes, it's perfect.
Okay, so I'm just starting now. So the title of my presentation is a synomic concept, and this is the first part of my presentation, and how it is related to the sentient eukaryotic cell. And I will start now with some problem which we have in biology, that it is somehow upside down, because in early years when we started to study biology, so we focused on humans because we wanted to know how we work, but we started with the wrong end, because this is the very complex system, and normally in science you should start with something very simple, and when you understand it you can go up and up in complexity. And so we have now this problem with terminology, because many of these terms, which are now also valid for cells, but they are now somehow reserved only for humans, like different kind of words like learning, memory, cognition, sentience, and so on. So it is a very big problem now, and it is not a good idea to invent new words, because then it would be a complete mess. So we somehow start with this problem, and I would like maybe at the beginning to mention that this is not a new approach. There were several important people who were already interested in this version of life explanation. So, for example, Alfred Binet with Psychic Life of Microorganisms, or William James in his Principles of Physiology, Wilhelm Wundt, Principle of Physiology 2. So these were mostly psychologists, philosophers, but then also Herbert Jennings with his very nice book, Behavior of Lower Organisms, and Lynn Margulis, of course, 2001, she published paper entitled Conscious Cell. And so I met Arthur Reber, I will explain later a little bit to you, some almost 7 or 8 years ago. He was at the time finishing his book, The First Minds, and we immediately somehow started collaboration. And in the same year, we published this paper in Bioessays, Sentience and Consciousness in a Single Cells, How the First Minds Emerge in the Unicellular Species. So this is Arthur. Unfortunately, he died last year, but we have very, very nice collaboration in these 7-8 years. And our idea is in this so-called CBC theory, cellular basis of cognition or consciousness. So the basic idea is that it starts with the cells, with the first cells, and then in the evolution, of course, it is changing. Of course, the sentience of a very ancient cell is different like modern cells, and of course, sentience of multicellular systems is also different like unicellular systems. But the main idea here is that all consciousness or sentience is coming from cells. So this is 20 June 2003 when I first met him in person, and this was the 6th Symposium of Plant Signaling Behavior in Seattle. And as I mentioned, he died last year, unfortunately. And I met 1 week later also Bill Miller, who is also our collaborator in most of these papers. This was another conference in Los Angeles, Pushing of Boundaries, Neurosciences, Cognition, and Life. And also we were joined by Predrag Slipiewicz later, and we have several papers with him too. I would like to maybe advertise his book, which is very nice and very relevant to our today's topic, Biocivilizations, a new look at the science of life. So we published in this 7-8 years 25 papers and chapters. This is just the list, you don't need to read all this. And we also have published 1 book, and the second one will be out very soon. And what is here very important from our perspective is that this synome, this is a new concept. Almost no one heard about it yet, but anyway, we published these 25 papers where it is based on the synome. And the point is that we propose that, as it was mentioned here, that the plasma membrane of the cell is the principal structure which allows subjectivity, because it encloses the inner space inside of the cell from the outside of the space. This layer, this membrane is excitable and it generates bioelectric fields, and it is based on lipid bilayer and many proteins, of course. And so I will maybe explain a little bit here. So the subjectivity what we have, and only we personally are sure about our consciousness, no one else can be sure. And with the new AI science, it will be even more difficult. So this outside-inside dichotomy is first allowed by this plasma membrane. It is important to be aware that from the very first cell, some 4 billion years ago, the plasma membrane is not made anew. It is only replicating and dividing. So this border, based on these excitable proteins and lipid bilayers, is powered by freely moving electrons. This is very important here. And cells generate via this plasma membrane generated synomic fields, models of outside world. And the survival is possible only if these models, the synomic models, have a high fidelity. Otherwise, the cells were not able to evolve further and they were ending their evolution. So in modern cells, we have in plasma membrane many receptor, sensor, ion channels, transporters, and the cytosol is very closely affiliated also. And so we propose that this synomic field, of course it is still just hypothetical structure, but it is a physical structure based on cell bioelectricity via bioelectromagnetic fields generated by charged molecules, ions, and many biomolecules which have charged nature, and it is kind of an information matrix. So it is, again, based on the plasma membrane. So in this first paper, which we published 2018, we proposed the genome, it is in blue here, as a structure at the plasma membrane, but it permeates also inside of the cell and radiates out of the cell. What is important here that it acts at the nanoseconds, microsecond, millisecond, second time scale, while the epigenome, which is well known, and the genome here in red, they operate at minutes, hours, and maybe days. So we propose that every cell has this triadic nature with the genome, epigenome, and genome, three different kind of information matrices, but the genome is the first one which the cell is using in interaction with the outside world. And again, it is acting at a very, very fast rate, time scale, while the other epigenome, genome are much slower. And the cells are bioelectric because they have discharged ions, reactive species, and all macromolecules, cytoskeletal molecules are charged and generate electric fields. Of course, it is not easy now to really explain everything here, and it is very complex, and still these ideas are in work in progress. But what is here clear when I compare, for example, a cell which is very active in endocytic vesicle recycling, like here, for example, a neuron, then the genomic apparatus is much more evolved in such a cell. And maybe on the other hand, we can have example of red blood cell, which has a very special function, and there is almost no endocytosis going on, or very little. So this red blood cell is much less informed about the outside world like the neuron. So this is and also the plasma membrane here is much more evolved because even these vesicles, endocytic vesicles, they are enclosed with the membrane which was previously plasma membrane. So this recycling here is very active, and it makes the genomic field of such a cell very, very strong. And another issue is also that if the cells are very close together and the radiating genome are predicted to be able to interact, and they generate something what we call in-space epigenome. So it is a genomic field of these cells together, but in principle, every cell in our body, if they are close together, they can somehow interact together and generate this in-space epigenome. Inside of the cell, especially in the eukaryotic, but I will come later to this, the situation is very complex because there are not just these endocytic vesicles, but there is a very, very diverse system and membrane system there. And we propose that every membrane inside of this cell, eukaryotic cell, is also generating genome, but the plasma membrane is the principal membrane for this issue. So the genome are some kind of a bioelectromagnetic fields permeating the cell from the very beginning of cell evolution. And we propose that the genome is acting as a sensorium because it is connected to every sensory events of the cell, but also a kind of oratorium that because it also controls metabolism, proteome, epigenome, and also the genome. So the genomic fields are somehow integrated, and they are very flexible, very fast events there, but they control the lower levels of integrated cells, and epigenome and genome are the most important one. Here I would like to present just two Hungarian scientists who could be considered at the roots of the genomic theory from our perspective. So Albert St. Georgi, he was proposing that the movable electrons are exciting matter, and all living matter is excited by these electrons and charged biomolecules. And Eugene Wigner also was making very nice philosophical papers related to the consciousness and sentience. So, and here I would like to go to another almost forgotten person, this Wilhelm Laufberger. He was quite famous for some other issues. He was discoverer of ferritin, but he also, in early years of his scientific career, he was very much interested, and he made experimental experiments where he found that the cell is having kind of a cellular grid, which is based on the electromagnetic forces of all biomolecules in the cell. And this electromagnetic force somehow is maintaining the matrix of the cell, and the cell is held together by this electrostatic field. At his time, he was not aware of many new issues, but he was proposing that this cellular grid is based on charged molecule, and every charged molecule is having a grid coordinates. That means that the charge is generating the field, but the field is also imposing physical impact on the charge. So the charge somehow is moving within the field, and there are coordinates which gives some information where this charged particle is located. It's a very complex issue because all these charged molecules and ions, they are moving all the time, and also other molecules, so it is not easy to somehow study this. But what is important is that, as with the plasma membrane, with the very first cells, the new cells could form only by cell division. There was no other way how the cell could form de novo. And so this is the very famous omnicellular from Remak and Virchow. But also later, there was also some very important issue found by Sir Frederick Gordon Hopkins, that a cell has a history at the level of cellular structures, and structures are also inherited in cell evolution or the whole evolution. So with every cell division, also the structure is inherited. And Paul Weiss was also adding that also the organization, intracellular organization, is also, the order is inherited too. So we say also that also synome is inherited with every cell division. Here it is important to be aware that the first 2 billion of years of evolution, there were only unicellular organisms. So first 2 billions, there was just cells. And later, when the multicellular systems were evolving, so the cells have lost the complete independence, but they are still maintaining some independence, and they still maintain their cellular sentience. And somehow the cellular sentience based on synome is part of the evolution, and the biological order and evolution is somehow maintained by these cells, even if they are parts of a multicellular organisms. Now I would like to move to the second part of my presentation, where I will give some information about our theory on cell theory, our update of cell theory. So the Daniel Mazia was making in this very short, in fact, it was just abstract, published from the conference, and he made this proposal, which was also somehow in not very precise way already proposed earlier in 1987. But his proposal is that the cell, eukaryotic cell, is based on 2 parts. So one is the classical plasma membrane and the cytoplasm, but the second one, the nucleus with the microtubules, which are mostly organized by nuclear surfaces, he called this part a cell body. And he proposed that the cell body is having different evolutionary origin from the plasma membrane and from the cytoplasm. I was collaborating with Sherry Lyons, which is a historian, and she made this very nice book. Also, we make also some papers, but I propose you to read this book, From Cells to Organisms, Envisioning Cell Theory, where she put all together all this information. Just by briefly, I would like to also mention here Julius von Sachs, because he, in fact, was having a very similar theory, and Daniel Mazia was not aware of this theory, maybe. So Julius Sachs proposed so-called energit concept, which predated the Daniel Mazia cell body by some 100 years. And there were 2 papers where Julius von Sachs, in fact, proposed the same theory, in which he proposed that the nucleus with the associated structures, of course, at the time of Julius von Sachs, microtubules were still not characterized, but it was, in fact, in his paper very nicely stated that the nucleus is organizing sphere of influence, which is controlling space within the cell. And also he proposed that this is the smallest unit of eukaryotic life, the nucleus with this perinuclear space. I, together with my co-authors, Dieter Volkmann and Peter Barlow, we translated his paper, German paper. He translated the German paper into a theory of sorry, I have someone is ringing my bell, and I'm sorry, I must maybe interrupt my talk, and I will be back soon.
Okay, we almost ready with this presentation, but because I tried to find out the timing is okay, but perhaps we can allow a couple of minutes more just to finish the presentation, because many of the questions are, at least I have plenty of questions here, and I guess you have them too. So, František, how much time do you envision also?
I have still a few slides.
Okay.
Can I
2
continue?
minutes?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so in eukaryotic cell, we have somehow genomic and genomic ecosystems with the cells within the cells. And these cells within cells are integrated via something which we call intracellular synapses. Of course, we have sometimes over 1,000 nuclei in some systems like spores of arbuscula mycorrhiza. Plant endosperm is a very nice example where the cell division are not connected, so the nuclear division not associated with the plasma membrane. And so we have a multi-nuclear system which somehow generate sphere of influence via these microtubules. And this energite can generate a new cell de novo, but a nuclear cell never generates new energy de novo. This is very important. So, and this is maybe my conclusion now that we published this paper where we showed that in evolution, circadian clocks are acting as a cognitive anticipatory systems, and they evolved in very ancient cells some 4 billion years ago. And these clocks were not based on gene expression, but on reactive oxygen species molecules. And they integrate. Now we know that even plasma membrane has clock every cell, but even mitochondria and chloroplast and even nucleus has its own clock, but they are integrated together into one unified cellular clock. So we think that this integration of these clocks is something similar how these genomic fields of every organelle is also unified and making one eukaryotic genomic field. We have published this book where you can find all information relevant to what I talked today. Also, we have now another book which will be published soon in July 2026. It will be based mostly on the cognition biology, but also we are evolving also the genomic concept further in this book. So thank you very much for your listening.
Thank you, František. I think we can leave the questions that everybody has for the discussion. So let us have now Brian Ford present his view on cellular intelligence.
Well, how very nice to see Bill Miller, a great friend of mine, mentioned. My presentation is going to deal with the bizarre hubris of those who overestimate the capacity of artificial intelligence. And I also deal with the way in which technology has successfully failed to create artificial life. Can you run the tape for me, Plamen?
Oh, I have it. Just a moment. Unfortunately, I have it on the other computer. I mean, I switched the computers.
Then I have to say you are an excessively silly boy. Now, does that show? Are you seeing this? Are you seeing my presentation?
Not yet. Just share the screen.
Well, I have my presentation. I sent it to you so that you could click on it and save us this division.
Yes, it's saved. Then I have to switch on the other computer. That's the point. Maybe I have to get out from there. No problem.
I have no indication here on how I would share this. I have it up on my.
František, can you switch off your screen sharing?
I already switched it off.
Okay, so Brian, on the bottom line, you will see share screen. It's actually
yes, I have that.
The third one on the bottom line, next to the camera.
There we are.
So when you press on it, you will be able to share the screen. Yes, it's coming. It's coming. Perfect.
Do you now have that?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. Then
So
let
you
me
can
run
start.
this for you.
The presentation of the cellular intelligence cell theory is based on the fact that we live in an era of algorithmic aspiration. We're surrounded on all sides by social media. There are over 100 social media sites.
Please,
Over
the audio
5
a bit more.
Ruled by influencers.
Louder.
Where you can find anything online from hardcore to soft drugs. There is often an argument, isn't there, that social media sites are publishers, but of course they're not their platforms. They're mere platforms that people can post anything they want. ChatGPT, launched in 2022, now has 250 million users every day. Yet, some of what it says isn't true. We regard it as a resource with access to the world's facts, but if it hasn't got the facts, it makes them up. For example, you might find out about me online, and you'll be told that I was born in December 1939 in Liverpool. Well, the year is right, but I was not born in December, nor was I born in Liverpool. It assures you that I have a PhD in microbiology from the University of London. I have no PhD from any university, let alone London. And the funniest of all is this one. One of my notable achievements was debunking the myth of spontaneous generation. Maggots do not spontaneously generate from rotting wood. No, my work was on spontaneous human combustion. It was Francesco Redi way back in 1668 who finally did away with spontaneous generation. AIs will invent facts, they will hallucinate if they can't find what they want. People like to say that computers can do things no humans can do well, so can a pencil or a screwdriver or a plane a pin. All they worry about computers inflicting war upon us, but how could you press the button without a finger? I wrote that article, ladies and gentlemen, almost 16 years ago. The concerns were real then, as they are now. It was as true in microbiology. The scientists were claiming to have created pathogens when all they'd really done was to shuffle them about a bit. It also was published about 60 years ago. But come back to the origins of robotics. In 1562, when an extraordinary miniature monk was created in Spain. He was commissioned by King Philip II, the son of Charles V, the Holy Roman Emperor, 464 years ago, made by a Spanish engineer, Juan Triano. There is an example in the Deutsches Museum in Munich, and this one at the Smithsonian, where it was filmed by John Hiller. It looked just like a little man. In 1774, Jacques Droz in France created the writer, an automaton, now in the Franklin Museum in Philadelphia. It could actually write letters and still can by shifting around cams specially constructed to move physical cams. A system of gears, cams, and levers gave this uncanny automaton a remarkably lifelike appearance. Indeed, it inspired Martin Scorsese to film his movie Hugo in 2011. And what about this? In the present day, we're concerned about obscenity, but it's not new. In 1780s, erotic clock in ornament style, rather like that of James Cox, the English manufacturer, showed pastoral scenes, but in a hidden chamber, pure pornography, carrying on in its mechanical form. This little chamber was concealed by a beautifully enameled duck. The duck, of course, was rhyming slang for what was going on within. Shall we move forward to the next stage when these pioneering robots responded to voice control? This is one developed by Professor Harry May in 1932. It was shown at the London Radio Exhibition and later in the United States, including an exhibition in Macy's in New York. Meet Alpha the robot.
Your right arm. Fire! Lower your right arm.
Are you married?
Not yet.
What can I tell you tonight?
No.
Next, a robot that could walk by itself. This was Electra, created by the Westinghouse Electric Corporation and shown for the first time at the 1939 New York World Fair.
I present to you the Electro, the Westinghouse Model Man. And And here he comes, ladies and gentlemen, walking up to greet you under his own power.
I am a smart fellow, as I have a very fine brain of 48 electrical relays.
That's the most remarkable thing I've ever seen.
All right, now, Electro, I know you enjoy these, and I'm really going to try to give you a nice pleasure out of these.
Where did he go with you?
You, me, no, Smoke. And folks, he's only 2 years old, too. Just learning.
In 1940, an imitation robot called Rollo was created. Even in 1940, it was understood that robots were already running everything.
Rollo, answer the door.
Rollo fix. Yes, Rollo the robot, the chromium-plated butler, is just a daydream after all. But not so Rollo's little brother and sister robots, the millions of small mechanical servants that never ask for afternoons off, the amazing machines and gadgets that almost seem to think for themselves. The tiny clockwork brains and heat regulators on our kitchen stove apparently do almost everything except read the cookbook. Thinking machines like this keep golden brown slices of toast from turning into slabs of charcoal, and keep the coffee hot until we're ready to start dunking. And here's a gadget that ought to rate a bow from every dog in the country. A Fido feeder that never forgets when the pup is dining home alone and the rest of the family is dining out. In offices and schoolrooms, too, robots have learned to turn on the lights. When the light level outside drops below the requirement for good visibility, this robot throws a switch, and the first bank of lights goes on. Hundreds of these little robots are doing more things for us than we realize, taking care of the routine tasks and leaving us free to live and work and play in greater ease and comfort and safety.
This simple little circuit diagram was created by Gray Walter of Bristol in 1949. He said it had 2 relays, 2 condensers, 1 sensor, and 2 small thermodynamic valves that in his view corresponded to neurons. He insisted that this was a primitive form of life, and he even gave it, like all living things, a Latin name, Machina Speculatrix.
In a simple villa on the outskirts of Bristol lives Dr. Gray Walter, a neurologist, who makes robots as a hobby. They are small, he doesn't dress them up to look like men, he calls them tortoises, and so cunningly have their insides been designed that they respond to the stimuli of light and touch in a completely lifelike manner. This model is named Elsie, and she sees out of a photoelectric cell which rotates above her body. If she brushes against any object in her path, contacts are operated that turn the steering away, and so automatically she takes avoiding action. Mrs. Walter's pet is Elmer, Elsie's brother, in the darker bit. Dr. Walter says that his electronic toys work exactly as though they have a simple 2-cell nervous system, and that with more cells they will be able to do many more tricks. Already Elsie has one up on Elmer. When her batteries begin to fail, she automatically runs home to her kennel for charging up, and in consequence can live a much gayer life.
The first humanoid home robot came out in 1984. This was Omnibot.
The Omnibot series was introduced in the early 80s by the Japanese company Tomy,
The Omnibot series featured some snazzy robots designed not just for learning, but also for fun and practical use around the house. It had this sleek design, complete with a friendly-looking face that made it look like a real companion. They were here to entertain, assist, and even fetch you a soda if you wanted. They could carry small items, play cassette tapes, and even respond to voice commands.
Humanoid robots showed in this BBC Two television program called Computers in Control in 1984.
In an increasingly sci-fi world, there was a desire for tech we could relate to. The educational series Computers in Control showed us the efforts made to give machines friendly faces.
Hello, Coach B. Any of you fellas need a little shave or trim, just get in line here. All right, be neat now. Be neat. That's nice. Now comes the tricky part. They wanted me to sit in the chair, and I said, find yourself another dummy. The slide bug in the program, and you might end up with your head on the floor.
And next, the first generative AI robot. It dates from 1989 and was shown in Season 1, Episode 12 of Young Children. A Tandy 1000 SL. Its software was called Eliza, launched in 1966 by Joseph Weizenbaum at MIT.
Hello, I am Eliza. My parents are fighting a lot.
I see. Can you elaborate on that?
My mother got me this computer, but my dad says we can't afford it.
Can you elaborate on that?
Are you going to help me or not?
Hello, I am Eliza.
The future might be aberrant.
Next, humanoids actually accepted as people. This one was Pepper. It appeared before a parliamentary select committee in the United Kingdom to answer questions about the use of AI in the classroom. It began work as a customer engagement robot in a bank. It was tested in care homes as a companion robot and was used as a receptionist in offices all around the world.
You can call me Pepper.
Nice to meet you, Pepper.
Great to meet you.
So tell me a little bit about yourself.
My name is Pepper. I'm a humanoid robot. I do and I love what I see.
Oh, wow. This date's going well.
Would you like to take a picture with me?
Yeah, absolutely.
Error 700. Please try to reboot me to fix the problem.
That's not the first time I've had an error on a date. So the good thing about a date with a robot, if it doesn't go well, you can just replace it with another one.
Humanoid robots invaded the world of cartoons as well.
So, you guys are my new coworkers. So, working hard or hardly working? Are you A, working hard, or B, shout? I guess I just met the Joker of the group.
It is The Simpsons. Season 23, Episode 17. In 2016, on the BBC, Fiona Lumley. And finally, before this embarrassing war, the Saudi Arabian authorities decided to issue a passport and a national identity to a robot called the Queen.
You have been now awarded what is going to be the first Saudi citizenship for a robot.
So I would thank very much the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. This is historical to be the first robot in the world to be recognized with a citizenship.
Thank you very much, Sophia.
I'm so embarrassed that they could do this to what is in essence a giant doll. This is real life. This is something no robot can ever do. This microbe in a pond browses past a diet and suddenly sees a ciliate that it pounces upon. It's like watching a cat hunt a sparrow on the lawn. This is a single cell. This is the complexity of life. We're brought up to think that amoebae are the simplest forms of living organisms. Just a shapeless blob of jelly. But that's because no one teaches you about the interesting. Many of them can build shells themselves. Here, under the microscope, is the empty shell of a shell building amoeba. Here is another example, being grazed upon by some tiny protozoan. By chance, I saw these lampshades at a market stall. Now, if you made a lampshade like that, here is one in close up, I'd be quite impressed. Yet a single-celled amoeba constructs something that is absolutely identical, even down to that little rounded collar. That's what a single living cell can do. Robotics in the cell. And if you want to see intelligence in life, then just look at this interesting experiment. Here is a group of half a dozen antithamnium cells. It's a red alga. So what we're going to do is to cut one of them in half with a steel needle. The contents pours out into the surrounding water. Basically speaking, it's like cracking an egg. That cell wall is now empty, dead, and deserted. The question is, what happens next? Well, under time lapse, we can see that what actually happens is that the neighboring cells realize what's happened. We have no means of knowing how they recognize it, but they do. And the cells expand themselves to occupy and realign the broken cell wall. It is speeded up about 30 times. Now, within a day or so, the original cell has been reformed, and the cell wall is meticulously realigned and seamlessly mended by mechanisms of which we have no knowledge whatever, and through stimuli of which we have no understanding. This is intelligence. Intelligence means, let's have a look at it again, intelligence actually means the ability to solve an unforeseeable problem. That's what intelligence is, and that's what this simple problem can do. The only way in which a filament would be broken would be if a dinosaur fell on it, or there's a rush of water, or a rock fall, or something of the sort, in which case both ends of the broken filament will end up yards away. In which case, we're going to end up in juxtapositions on the microscopist's slide. And when we watch what happens, we can see that those little intelligent cells address the problem, a problem they can never have experienced in their evolutionary history. And they slowly and methodically repair the damage, reconstitute the cell, and restore the filament to normality. That's intelligence. We have come and nowhere near imitating it. Artificial intelligence doesn't exist. It is no more than heuristic digital automation, and it's time we faced the fact. Grateful to many people who helped. Thanks to all my sources, which will make the point that robotics is really just making an elaborate doll. That the control of society by robotics goes back centuries. And that real intelligence resides in life, not in software.
Thank you, Brian. So, let's start now with the questions on both sides. I would give the honor to the audience first. I will be last. So who wishes to ask something? Or maybe you would like to ask each other, František, Brian, and vice versa. What about? Start
Yeah, the audience should have the right to start, I think, Plamen.
Let's start with the audience, yes. Okay.
Yeah, I have something to say.
Okay, Eric, you're welcome.
I'm surprised, Brian, that you decided to speak to us via robotics. You're criticizing robotics, but you're using the exact technology to communicate. I would have much preferred a personal interaction rather than a robotic one. And so similarly, intelligence, the way you define it, some of these new models are obviously intelligent in that way. So that's my comment.
I'm afraid we're stuck with digital technology, whether we like it or not. I keep smiling over the way in which they say that 16-year-olds should be protected from from social media that anybody under 16 shouldn't have access to it because it might damage them and cause them problems. In my view, anybody under 60 shouldn't be allowed to have access. This is the world that we're stuck with. Ordinarily, of course, one simply speaks to an audience. But on this occasion, Plamen was quite strict. 20 minutes is the limit, and the only way to be certain to squeeze it all into 20 minutes was to pre-record it. But I assure you that there was no robotics alluded to in the processing of what I did. It was actual videos and real Brian.
Yeah, but actual robotics produce the videos.
No.
Okay.
Well,
yes.
Yes. Robotics didn't produce the videos. If robotics were going to produce them, I would simply click on an AI and say...
Yeah, but it's the way you define robotics. Obviously, robots are much more general than that.
Indeed, but my point is, of course, that as we saw with that unbelievably embarrassing, laughable situation in Saudi Arabia, when simply because this doll looked vaguely human, these wealthy, successful international diplomats and businessmen were reacting to her in the same way a little child of 3 would pick up a doll and think that was real. It is astonishing. I mean, we call it artificial intelligence, but it is not in any way intelligent. All that AI can do is to harvest digitized data somewhere on the internet and couch it in learned vernacular form. That is all they can do.
But you have to admit that there's been amazing progress in the notion of understanding, even if it may understand indirectly.
No.
Oh, yes.
No, I understand things. AI doesn't understand anything. All AI understands is the order in which words were previously placed by other writers, and it harvests convenient juxtapositions and realigns them to create
but it's
language.
just amazing.
But AI has no knowledge or understanding of anything.
It doesn't matter whether it has an inherent understanding. What matters is it is able to have the simulation of understanding. So if I look for something, say on my laptop, I can ask it in natural language and it understands what I am referring to. Now, it may not always correctly respond. As you say, there are many hallucinations, and it's unfortunately or fortunately that's still the case. But still, there's definitely functional understanding in the way anybody would normally define it.
Maybe you mean the Turing test, Eric. I mean, that current engine, ChatGPT, whoever, Gemini, is actually simulating or emulating the Turing test. So if you...
No, not just the Turing test. I'm talking about actual functional day-to-day understanding when you interact with something. And these things obviously have the ability to understand in a functional sense and respond in a way that is useful. And that's what's important. It doesn't matter whether it's artificial or not.
Eric, where are you? You're out in the open air. It looks wonderful.
Yeah. Yes, I wonder where I am.
Yeah, I will tell you. You introduced a really important word just now. You spoke of simulation. If AI was called simulated intelligence, I would have no trouble whatever with the term.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Just because it's artificial, you have trouble with it? It is artificial, totally artificial.
But it's not intelligent. Something which is simulated says it's not real.
Oh, come on. Of course it's intelligent in the sense that it has certain aspects of intelligence, namely understanding, functional understanding. Now, granted, the intelligence is limited.
Eric,
but it has it. Yeah.
Can you recall the definition, Brian's definition, the ability to handle unexpected situation? I mean, this is exactly where all of AI at the moment, as it is defined, fails. So unexpected situation cannot be handled with intelligibly in a way that we could expect. Basically,
but Plamen, we don't have to accept the definition. If we are constrained by the Procrustean bed of a definition, it doesn't get at the general subject.
No, but the question is, we have two frameworks, and in order to remain within the one framework, I mean, in the same situation, maybe František would have his own framework, and it is difficult to enter it without sharing the same, you know, even words or definitions. That's why I asked in the beginning where we remain. Otherwise, we have, of course, you change the definition, and this is a situation that I had earlier when I tried to have a discourse in a journal with integrated issues, and people were striking. I mean, imagine philosophers on the one hand and natural scientists on the other hand. They were striking all the time until they realized that we have to share common definitions in order to establish some way of, you know. So I like the way how František positioned himself between the earlier scientists in this field. And I had, at least for me, to clarify his position is, where do you see yourself between, I mean, saying the neo-Darwinists from Maturana Varela, that kind of autopoiesis, and Lynn Margulis' energetic theory. So you see yourself as a, I mean, where do you see yourself between these two kinds? Because for me it will be clearer when I know what you.
Yeah, for me, the cell is the most intelligent creature on this planet. It is evolving continually some 4 billion years. It's an unbelievable time, and it is uninterrupted time of evolution. So what the cell is doing, we don't know at all. We are really, we are living very few years. You know, our lifespan is very short. But the cells, in fact, they are inherited from the very beginning. They inherit the structure, order, plasma membrane, and also the genomic fields. So they evolve continuously 4 billion years now. And for example, from my perspective, we have consciousness only because our cells are conscious. That's why we have consciousness. Otherwise, we would have no consciousness. We have it just because our cells are conscious, and they can somehow interact together when they're close together, even in our bodies. So all cells in our body have their own consciousness. Of course, we don't have access to our liver consciousness or heart consciousness, which is good because otherwise we would spoil this whole body. So we should not have any access to this lower level of consciousness, which is running perfectly when you are healthy. If there is some problem in your cells, and they don't communicate properly, and the sentience is not perfect, then you start to have some troubles with your health. But this can be still solved by the cells if they are in a good shape, and if you provide them with the good conditions. And also, for example, if you are wounded, you are not thinking about how should I close my wound. This is done by cells. The cells know exactly what they should do. So the cellular consciousness and cellular intelligence is unimaginable. I think we still don't know exactly how it works. And one cell is much more complex as we think. It is much more complex. It is unbelievably complex.
But the one thing I would add is that we are never going to model it through the movement of ions or through simple models of biochemistry or electrochemistry. I am a neo-vitalist. There is something infinitesimally small about what we can achieve compared to the mighty majesty of life. Living cells are so much more complicated, and these attempts to model tiny bits make no effect on me. I want to say one thing to Eric on the subject of intelligence. I had a great problem with configuring one of our computers. The Wi-Fi wouldn't work, and I consulted AI Grok, which is really good for writing software. And I spent an hour and a half, and Grok became more and more perplexed and gave me more and more detailed instructions, and it still wouldn't work. So I phoned a friend of mine who is intelligent, and he said, have you plugged in an antenna? And that solved the problem. That's because that wasn't in the digital databases that AI could access, but it was in what an intelligent person would know.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
May I respond to that?
Yes, go on.
Okay, but shortly, please.
Okay, short. I mean, I agree with you that Grok and these models can stumble over themselves. They get more and more refined and actually get worse at that sense. But there are also many aspects where they do understand. And to Francesco, is that your name, Francesco?
Yeah, František.
Yeah. Obviously, cells may be conscious, but it has very little to do with the nature of consciousness of human beings. Look at the Wernicke area. Look at the Broca area. How do these work? They don't work just by individual cells. They work by the organization of those neurons.
The cell
organization is different.
Yeah, the cell in your brain, they are making some clusters, of course. But without cells, your brain would be not able to understand anything. If you would not have cells in your brain, you would be not able to have consciousness.
Yeah, okay, but that doesn't mean that doesn't mean they're conscious. It doesn't mean that they're anywhere near conscious. It only says that they're a minimal condition. Sorry,
again, it is the definition, of course. I don't say that cell consciousness is the same like your consciousness or my consciousness.
Yeah, exactly. This is the point with the definition. But let me ask you, and I will link the question also to Catherine Powell, because Kaufman, because I see here a very interesting aspect. Do you think that the intelligence, I mean, in your definition, in your framework, is really starting with the cell, not with anything, say, for instance, with another particle, say the mitochondria, for instance, because they both have their own DNA. You could see, okay, this is an entity on itself. In evolutionary, you know that actually mitochondria were acquired by cells, by eukaryotic cells. So the question is, why do you think that this is the unique, like the atom, the unit from which consciousness actually is built upwards to in orders? And the other issue is that is related to plants and botany. We know that plants, I mean, it has been commented or written many times about many different kinds of intelligence in the plants, even emotional intelligence, also in animals, Brian, to say the psychological effects of plants on human beings, the way of how they understand human language, human feelings. I mean, there are also therapies that you actually asked to embrace a tree, a big tree, and then you feel free or healed in a way. So that kinds of psychological effects, different kinds of intelligence in plants, and where it starts. I mean, really at the cellular level or even deeper.
Yeah, so what I showed in one of my slides, so the first 2 billion of years evolution, these were just unicellular, but not eukaryotic cells. These were just prokaryotic kind of cells, bacteria, cyanobacteria. So the mitochondria is one of these bacteria trapped inside of the eukaryotic cell, but it still has its own independence a little bit. It is still slightly independent and work together, of course, with other cellular structures and organelles together. In plants, we have another complication because we have chloroplasts, plastids, which were also independent cells at the very early times. So in the plant cell is much more complicated, and it is much more difficult for plant cell to work in harmony because they are not just mitochondria but also chloroplasts and plastids. So it is, but the beginning is the prokaryotic cell. And 2 billion of years there were just prokaryotic cell on this planet, no eukaryotic cell, and they built together. Somehow, we still don't know how, they built together eukaryotic cell, which is already a very complex composite cellular structure. There are cells within a cell, which is very important. And every cell has its own interests, so it is difficult how to negotiate these intracellular conflicts in order that this eukaryotic cell is really functioning properly, and it took very long time. So the eukaryotic cell's evolution was not easy task. It was a quite long evolution also. So for me, the basic unit of sentience consciousness is a prokaryotic cell. But of course, also the eukaryotic cell, host cell, was some kind of prokaryotic cell when it got to the mitochondria and other organelles. So it was also a prokaryotic cell.
Yes.
We don't know what is the identity of this host cell. We don't know. It is still arguing, but my understanding is These were all ARCA cells, both the host cell and the guest cell. And the host cells was based on actin cytoskeleton, and the guest cell was based on microtubules. And they then together merged and made the eukaryotic cell. So that's why I think that the nucleus with the centrosomes and microtubules is inherited from the guest cell, and the rest, the plasma membrane, cytoplasm was and actin cytoskeleton was the host cell. So there was a merging of two different cells. They merged together and make eukaryotic cell.
We also need to distinguish, of course, between bacteria and archaea. Lynn Margulis, who was a dear friend, and I miss her still. I also remember in 1973, now that's going back more than 50 years ago, when Professor Dupont in Toulouse sent me the micrographs that he just obtained showing DNA inside mitochondria. And that was an extraordinary moment, I must admit. But remember that the notion of symbiosis was formed, I think, in 1888. It is not a 20th century invention. Indeed, the scientist, I can't recall his name, the botanist who first discovered and first documented chloroplasts, within 3 months of that was speculating that chloroplasts might have begun as pre-living chlorophytes and had been absorbed by the eukaryotic cell. So it's actually an old view, and I think some of those pioneers probably deserve more credit than they get.
And here is exactly the question of do you, František, think that between animals and plants, I mean, this is a slightly, artificial limit or borderline between two, because we have like amoeba, there could be considered as both kinds of entities. So do you think that coevolution is something that is common to plants and animals? I mean, just in the way of Margulis, and intelligence evolves in the same manner, just by exchanging, by interactions of different species. Because I was wondering as a young boy, when I listened about carnivore plants, I said, okay, look, the plants develop earlier than the animals. How do they trap the flies and the other animals? I mean, where is this intelligence to trap the flies and to, consume them? But in a way, this is actually a coevolution.
Yeah, it is. And, the possibility of this coevolution is because we are based on cells, and plants are also based on cells. So we are made in the same way. And that's why it works even without any conscious information about this. For example, what we call that we have some plants which are domesticated, and we say that we have domesticated them. It is still not sure if not it was opposite, that the plants domesticated us. It is still not absolutely sure. And in the coevolution and domestication, both partners must be willing to cooperate. If one of the partner is not willing, then there will be no successful domestication. So not every plant can be domesticated, not every animal can be domesticated. There must be willingness in both partners, and then it is some kind of coevolution, in fact, what is called domestication. And,
so
I think the cells are the intelligent cells. Intelligent cells are the principle, it is basic principle which allows its coevolution.
So we human beings are actually developing or evolving with our microbiome, for instance.
Yes, also.
Because, the link brain
yes.
gut link. The other issue now that I'm interested, do you distinguish between a term like emotional intelligence in plants? Something that, it's defined in psychology.
Wait, Plamen, let Kate speak. She's raised her hand.
Yeah. That's why I wish to.
In fact, we publish with my collaborators. We publish paper where we say that the cells are also having already feelings, and all this is on the cellular level already, and it is just getting more complex with evolution of multicellular systems. But everything is already there in a very, very simple way, or very, I would say, lower level way in every cell already. So all the feelings, they're there already, but in a different way. Not like we humans perceive these feelings, they perceive them in their own cellular level way.
Kate, how about you? What would you say?
Are you asking me?
Sorry?
Can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
Awesome. First of all, I want to say, František, I'm a huge fan of your work. I think
you very much.
that the concept of the genome is beautiful and long overdue. Brian, I loved your history of robotics and your wonderful contempt for the arrogance of what we perceive to be as artificial intelligence at present. There's a huge gap between large language models and what we can do with our robots. So anyway, what I would love to add to your story, František, is that, well, I've been arguing that emotion is actually the first embodied sense. And it imparted a simple semantic bit of information that is experienced as some binary distinction between something that feels good and something that feels bad. And I argue, as you do, that this had to have been some of the very earliest machinery of living cells, because a cell needs to get about in its environment. It needs to exchange energy with its environment within certain set points, if you will. And an organism had to be able to determine something that's good for me or bad for me. And yes. I wrote a paper on this back in 2014. And it seems obvious to me that the body is doing this. Certainly Damasio's work talks about the connection between the sense of identity and all of this. And I see a direct connection between the self, not self, distinctions made in the immune system, distinctions made in embryological development, in cell differentiation. The identity is central to organization of matter at every level. So I think that's really central. And the one difference that I see as something that remains entangled within the concept of cognition because of too much neurocentricity is the difference between emotional information, which is highly specific to the self. It's self-relevant information, and it calls attention to affordances, threats, benefits, all of this energy flow. It's all rooted in that. That's what that little information bit gives us. But what I'm mostly interested in, and I mean, if you want to stay with the brain, that's great, but look to the brain waves, because the brain is constantly dipping into all of the different, very slow and very fast, and the very slow waves are associated with the wisdom of the body. What is unconscious to us is actually using its own sort of sentience and signaling all the way from the very bottom up. And I think that there's lots of really good reasons to think that there are quantum effects in here, all the way down to the perception of light. And what you said, František, about clocks, that to me is one of the most significant things. And in my work, I've talked about how the first transmembrane protein receptors were associated with ancient peptides as well as biorhythms and clocks. So that right there is a perception of time. That is one of the earliest senses that we have. But we also have a perception of the body moving in space. That's not meta-consciousness, has nothing to do with language, but that had to have been there from the beginning. So I'm a huge fan, but with my work, I emphasize identity, information, and value, because value is completely missing from science, as is subjectivity, and yet it's central to how this whole system works. There are right states and wrong states that the body is constantly attaining dynamics with, but there is no good and evil in the story. So we have a lot of really mixed up ideas, particularly about the body. And we're told that it defies, all of our perceptions are illusions, they're lies, they're full of this and that. And that to me is just an extension of the denigration of the body by the Western Christian tradition, the idea that we're sinned or fallen, which is ridiculous. It's the most amazing physiological embodiment. It does things far beyond our comprehension, and it's so arrogant to suggest that the embodiment is anything less than a miraculous thing that it is. And the sensations that it gives us and the perceptions that it gives us are actually perfectly aligned with our agency and our tiny little bit of free will to intervene in our own machinery. Yes. So my question for both of you is, the computational model, obviously these processes have a computational component. They are law driven. They are rooted in the binaries and complementary opposites of the laws of physics and gauge symmetry and all that. So the computational model that Eric is pointing toward that does such a good job of model building and prediction. Of course, prediction is a feed-forward function that has to be based upon a feedback signaling, which is what the organism does. So how far can you take the active inference model? That's my question for you, František, because it seems to be the popular way of interpreting computational processes. And
so this process.
Plamen, will you just allow me just to interject and say that we've run well over time, and I really will have to go.
Yes.
But
yes.
We'll follow the rest of this online.
We have actually 1 minute.
On your side.
Yeah. Brian, thank you very much if you wish to go. I mean, otherwise.
Sorry to see you go, Brian. I would have loved to debate you more.
Yeah.
There will I will give you my answer to the Turing test. The Turing test was always nice.
Yes.
You can teach to play drafts quite simply, and it played drafts. Chess, more complicated. Language, more complicated still. But you saw my antithamnion demonstration, and what I want to say is this. The real Turing test, when computers are really able to emulate living creatures, you have 3 computers on a network. You smash up the middle one with a hammer. You lock up the laboratory and go home for the weekend. If, on the Monday morning, the central computer is now working and humming away again, then you have emulated life. Until then, you haven't.
May I have one last question to you because of the intelligence? If you consider, we talked earlier about on cancer or disease, cancer stem cells are considered also to be intelligent when they're treated with some kind of, therapy, I mean, chemotherapy, or so they come back later and they're even more resistant. Just the same situation as with viruses and bacteria. So how can we trick out? I mean, in your way, we also have our own body intelligence. What about this kind? I mean, how to trick or to overwhelm this or to handle this situation?
This relates to what I'm talking about with Eric and the dichotomy of the two approaches. It's also relevant to Katharina's point, a very good point about the eternal quest for environmental optimization. The point is that cancer cells are sometimes said to be intelligent because they can respond to treatment, they can respond to environmental stimuli, they can change themselves, they can seem to be hidden. And therefore, would artificial intelligence meet them on that ground? No, it wouldn't. Artificial intelligence, because it is nothing at all to do with intelligence, will harvest all the data that exists and will produce forms of chemotherapy that will have unusual and, from the cell's point of view, as yet unaddressed answers. So our digitized form of intelligence will find answers, but in a very different way from those in which the transformed and malignant cell is using its own inherent cellular intelligence to conquer problems. We will not be modeling the cell's intelligence, but using digital intelligence, algorithmic regulated automation in order to give us likely answers to problems that the cell may yet face us with. But the two forms of analysis are entirely different. And I'm sorry, Eric, we'll have to get it some other time.
I agree with you there, except that the cellular intelligence is evolutionary. Okay.
Well, take a sip of your beer, and I'll go and take a sip of my wine, and I'll toast you all.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Bye bye.
See you then. Bye bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Okay, so to the question of Katarina, so I think the cells are not based on algorithms and they are not based on digital. Of course, they have digital memory, but most of the memories in the cell is a structural memory based on other issues. It's not digital. And of course, the cell is also, again, I told you, it's so complicated that we can only understand it very slowly with some kind of modeling, of course, because otherwise we would not be able to handle this complexity. So we must do kinds of simulation, modeling, and so on. But the real cell, the real genome, is not digital. It's not algorithmic. I think there are even no computation. I think so. That it is just life. They are living their own. I cannot understand or cannot explain how it is, but it is based on electrons. It is electronic, the ionic system, very complex system. This system has its patterns. The patterns are evolving billion years, and this pattern somehow can maintain information, memory, and even predict what will come next according to the situation what this cell is experiencing. So these cells are really miracles. And they are creative. They are creative, and they created a life on this planet. So we are all products of the cells.
Mm-hmm.
I agree with that. And I'd like to add that in terms of the physics, the underlying physics, there's both analog and digital aspects of whatever information processing is going on. And I'm not a fan of any machine model either, but I do think that the computational model now is bringing us to right exactly where the limits of that metaphor are going to be, and pointing towards the very kinds of things that are going on with the genome at a very, very deep level, which changes quite a bit what we think to be true about ourselves. And I'm all for that. So I wanted to say that the computational paradigm, because of its digital aspects, is very helpful for the coarse graining. Yes. And that certainly is part of the fact that that our feelings come in two categories, those that feel good and those that feel bad. That is not something that is generated only by the brain at all. The logic of it starts much, much deeper. And it's part of the neurocentric story that we tell, that the value has to come from the top because that gives us control over it. But it's the fact that we don't recognize the value system that's coming from the bottom that has gotten us into so much trouble.
Yes. One issue also with the genome is, that the feeling, the primary feeling is very easy to explain with the genomic bioelectromagnetic field, because every charged particle feels its position within this field. They're feeling the position. Yeah. And when they are moving, they're also feeling, and sometimes they prefer some places in the cell, sometimes they prefer some other places, and they move around. So,
but I have a question. How do you explain the unity of consciousness? The unity of consciousness.
But sorry a moment. We have someone waiting for a long time. Just Krasimir has raised the hand. Please.
Okay. Let's have Krasimir.
Okay, thank you very much. I will be very short. I will show one slide. This is one of my thought. I in advance read what you write, and do you see my screen?
Yes. Yes.
Oh, this is simple truth. we do not ask whether cells are intelligent. We need to remake our understanding of intelligence. Intelligence is at different levels. So in the cell level, we have one kind of intelligence. At the humanity level, we have another type of intelligence. So there is no problem to say cells are intelligence. I agree with this. Maybe lower level we have with intelligence. That's all.
Yes, perfect.
Mm-hmm. Well, actually, there are also physicists that think or suggest that the whole universe is intelligence. Elementary particles, etc. But yeah, I mean, it is not too far away. The question is what is what, and it's finally a good point to start developing a common language, or at least to share. I mean, I like your concept, Krasimir, that you consider different levels of intelligence, saying, okay,
yes,
just as I asked, emotional, or natural intelligence, or computational intelligence, and in a way you can add something else in addition to intelligence in order to clearly define what you mean and be understood by the other, partners. So, but do you know the work, František, the work of Fritz Popp, his physicist?
Yeah, I know.
And he talks about biophotons. I mean, coming back to what Catherine suggested.
Biophotons are real, but it is difficult to study them because it is not easy task. But, the living cell is producing them. And they are somehow connected to the reactive oxygen species, mitochondria, and also microtubules. So they are produced and they are also used by these systems. And what is also very important is they should be as fast as a normal photon. So, but I cannot really understand how this would then work. But they are produced just by the living cells.
Yes, that's why he calls them biophotons. Yeah. But to link this with what we have, another phenomenon, not only AI, we have quantum computation. So would you say that plants are capable of quantum computation by having, chlorophylls, and I mean, being capable to process biophotons or create biophotons and process light?
Yes, the plants definitely have some quantum aspects, but again, this is difficult to study. So there are some papers on photosynthesis that there are some quantum processes going on there, and it is possible. But until now, we don't have a real good technique to study this. We can speculate only, I am afraid. And also with the biophotons, it is difficult to say if they have some function or they are just byproduct of processes and they are just released, emitted out of cells when they are having living processes. It is not easy.
How about if we start studying this by communication, for instance, between different species, for instance, animals and plants, human beings and plants, plants and different species of plants. I'm not going that far as in my youth, for instance, having reading the novels of Castaneda and having peyote actually incarnating within the human being and telling him what to do. I mean, that kind of intelligence. But basically, they're also psychedelic. I mean, this is something for Catherine, probably. The psychedelic properties of plants. How about the mushrooms and all the other, very strange. And also the whole pharmaceutics. Why some plants, I mean, many plants are having healing effects on humans, different kinds of diseases there. There is a sort of communication there, no matter whether this is intelligence or some quantum, aspects are there. Definitely there are field aspects. What kind of field is the question? Electromagnetic, everything is on Earth is electromagnetic entity. But how about starting to study these questions with communication?
Plants are producing a lot of substances which are having anesthetics functions or they are having painkiller functions in humans. But the plants produce these substances, I'm pretty sure, for themselves. We just use them. because the plants, if it is wounded, it produces locally anesthetics, locally. And it also produces painkiller substances. So for me, it is a real strong indication that they try to help themselves, not ourselves. We can just use these substances, of course, because they act also with us very nicely. But I think the plants are not doing this for us. They do it for themselves.
Yes, because we are reusing their ability. The whole pharmaceutics is reusing the ability to, to beat bacteria, whatever. We actually use them to.
Yeah, and plants also have very complex language, but it is a chemical language. So we will not be able to understand it only with maybe help of AI, because they release enormous amounts of chemicals. And we are not able to understand this very complex language of plants, but maybe AI will help in this respect.
But let me ask you one thing more. So now, plants, animals, and artificial intelligence on the one hand, and pharmaceutical products, which are also artificial, patented products. They are not really in real nature. So how to make, the whole world of artificial and natural substances communicate and be in balance? What do you think?
It's not easy to task, but because, for example, for me, every patent in life sciences is in fact not invented by humans, but it is taken out of the nature, out of the cell, and using it as an inventing patent, but it was invented by the cells and by the plants in very long evolution, and we just find a way how to understand the system, and we can then use the system for biotechnology and so on. But every patent in biotechnology and medicine is in fact invented by the cells, so it should be not patented to people. I think so.
But is it possible to have some kind of synergy between both worlds? That's my quick question.
I think so. Yes.
Co-evolution. We talked about plants and animals developing together, evolving together, and now having AI. Whatever kind of it. Even I do not. I'm more on the Brian side about AI and what should be AI, because I'm from more sticking to the older definitions of AI, but it's definition question. The story that is crucial for most our contemporary fellows is, how can we deal with all these novelties? Are they going to be dangerous for us? AI is going to steal jobs only, or they're going to replace human beings or animals, whatever we eat?
I think the danger is that it can be misused by some people. It can be misused, and then this is very dangerous. But the AI themselves will not make us in danger, but some people can misuse it for their own goals, and then this could be very dangerous if there are no clear rules and very effective control. It could be then dangerous.
Right.
Okay. So may I say about dangerous question, please? We have here a very interesting collaborator of FIS and also the Academy. It is Yuri Timsit. He is a brilliant researcher on ribosomes.
Yes, I know.
I would like to ask him, how does he see cellular intelligence from the point of view of the ribosome? Yuri, if you are around.
So ribosome.
Yes. Hello everybody. I'm very happy to participate to this meeting, and thank you, František. I'm also a fan of your work. I appreciate a lot. And this was a question that I wanted to ask you, and in the following of the question of Pedro, the cell is not the first living life in the earth. Before the cell, in the evolution time, in the origin, it was a molecular organization, macromolecular, supramolecular organization, and the question is for you, is the intelligence start at the cellular level or before?
it started before, but it was starting when the first vesicle was formed. The vesicle is in fact a miniature cell. But it has a limiting membrane, and this is important because then there is a subjectivity. You have inside space which you can control, and you can evolve the inside space in a way that it is improving, and this is then the sentience. So the first sentience started with the first vesicle, in fact. But these vesicles then later they were no real cells, just vesicles, and these were ephemeral vesicles, and they couldn't really reproduce properly, so there was still not a proper life. The proper life started with the first cells which was able to reproduce perfectly and make progeny, and the progeny was producing progeny, and so on and so on. But there was some kind of life based on these macromolecules, vesicles, and also these so-called condensates, what we now call biological condensates. I think they were outside before cells. But inside of the cells, they are now really coming to be very important, and they organize inside space of the cell, and they are also having electrostatic properties and bioelectric properties also. So I think it is some kind of like what Oparin was proposing. So these are, these biocondensates were maybe the Oparin quasar weights in some way. And there was some kind of a semi-life. It was a not proper life. So the proper life started with the very first cell, which was able to reproduce forever.
Let me ask you one thing here, because you mentioned Oparin's theory. How about the panspermia theory? I mean, life coming from somewhere else.
For me, panspermia is logically very appealing. So I think it is. Also, it would explain why the life started so early on this planet, because there was really almost immediate start of life. And we know that these meteorites are having all the components necessary for life. And it somehow it resembles me a little bit, the oocyte and the sperm cells coming together, so the Earth was as kind of oocyte and the meteorites as kind of sperms, but just imaginably, it was. I just think this appeals me a little bit because it is very similar.
Yes, so I identified yourself between all these guys that I asked, Margulis, Maturana Varela, panspermia. So your theory is really very appealing. I was not aware of it earlier, and I learned more about it now in these conversations. Thank you very much for everything.
Thank you very much.
So, would you have more to ask more questions? So maybe you wish. Who else? Because we are almost done now by time. I'm trying. There were very interesting major issues. I'm appealing for maybe a follow-up in a couple of months, maybe for everybody that he's, or maybe we in another format. I mean, even Brian was talking only because I mentioned some of the serious, dangerous aspects, and he focused only there on AI, artificial and real life. He had actually a message for us to make this distinction, but in a follow-up discussion we can talk about other aspects that are essential for us. How about that? More the psychological aspects, because I'm still here. For me now it becomes clear that the distinction between animals and plants is basically artificial. We are having, well, maybe different kinds of intelligence or adjustment or co-evolution of some properties that are very close to intelligence, but in a way there are different species, different forms of life that are living together in an environment and influencing each other. So plants do not have, I mean, they're using animals to populate their, I mean, to reproduce. I mean, plants are using animals, animals are using plants. So it's a kind of, they're different. It's exactly the Margulis theory of synergy and coevolution. So
yes, and also it is important to be aware that the plants don't need us, only some crop plants, of course, but otherwise the maize is the only plant which would not survive without humans because it cannot germinate the seeds. It cannot get them seeds out of the fruit. So the maize is the only which would go. But otherwise, if the plants are gone to this planet, then our society will not survive even 1,000 years, I am sure. Yeah. So we are absolutely dependent on these plants. And that's why we should understand them properly in the all complexity, because it is in our interest to understand them, because we are completely dependent on them.
Absolutely. So
maybe when you are interested, maybe I can in next meeting I can speak about the plants. I have a lot of.
Yes, they're still for me an enigma. I mean, even at school, you're not studying too much about plants. I mean, you start with a little bit biology, how the plants, and then you jump to the Mendel's laws of genetics, and that's it. Yes. I mean, we don't know much about botany at all. I mean. The average person, the educated person. So that would be great. Let us think about who could be another discussion partner, or you wish to talk alone. So
no, we can communicate this. We can communicate by email
and continue the discussion on the same topic about intelligence. So. Let us schedule this internally on the board, and you have time. I mean, that's the most important issue. You can jump in at any point. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for everybody for participating.
Nice to meet you. Thank you very much.
Nice to meet you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.